Salut coders, this is Pisky. Welcome back to another YouTube tutorial. In this tutorial, I want to introduce you to context and dependency injection. I feel like this topic is a challenge to new developers who want to know about a new framework. Even if you learned Spring framework and you can Spring Boot, so you can know how Spring Boot runs, but you don't know how it runs, especially on the base. Sometimes you get a null pointer exception because you didn't add some annotations. So that's the purpose of this video. And I want to talk about what is a bean, how the bean is created, the life cycle of beans, interceptors, but I'm not giving an example to how to create your custom interceptors because it will be going to be a challenge to new developers, the producers, the events and observers. And all of this, you are going to learn them practically on this video tutorial. So the first thing is that why I said we need dependency injection. The advantages of using dependency injection, it offers a loose coupling and high cohesion. So we will learn more about this. And also we need to know more about beans. What is a bean? So a bean is a container managed object that supports various basic services such as injection of beans, life cycles, and interceptors. I think you noticed a new word which is called container management bean. So what is container management bean? So as a developer, you don't have control of creating, deleting of these beans. You have to use annotations like application scoped, the one that we used on our tutorial, which is request mapping. This one it falls under request scoped. So these are the annotation like at configurations. This annotation, you can use them to instantiate beans. So we will talk more about these annotations. Then what is a container? A container is an environment where your application runs. It creates and destroys the instances of beans. By creating a beans, by destroying it, either via lazy loading or eagerly loading, is not your duty. It's the duty of container management. That's why we're saying Quarkus moved dependency injection into another level of Java EE. So it's an upgrade. But using Quarkus, it's going to be easy to create these beans. How the beans look like? We want to know how a bean look like. If you see this user controller, you can see when this application starts, as I told you, this bean will be managed in a container. So if I remove these keywords, it's no longer a bean because we don't know when this bean is going to be created or when this bean is going to be deleted. So we need to add annotations like at rest controller, so it will be under request scoped bean. So when the application starts, this controller will be added into a container and it will be a request scoped. A request scoped is, you have to know that its purpose is to serve HTTP requests. There are things that are done behind the scenes, such as the dispatcher servlet. Jakarta offers those things with the help of Quarkus. I didn't talk about application scoped. There's this bean that is called application scoped. So what I want to do right now, I want to create a new class and I will call it this was a user controller. I'll just call it user service, right? So this one, I just say implementation. So for this class is just a Java class, as you know. So to make it a bean to be managed by containers as a bean, we need to add annotation at application scoped. After doing this, you can see this arrow has been added and it's now be added into a bean. So if you are using latest IntelliJ, you can see this arrow being added on your application. So once this has been done, you can start to add more things in this application. This is called So by adding this annotation like application scoped, so what I can do, if I come to controller, user controller, this was a dirty code. As you can see here, this code is dirty. So we must remove dirty code in the controller and put them in what? And put this code inside a service. So that's why I created a user service implementation. So let's just copy this method. I want to copy this method, and here it is returning a user because let's just return a user in this method. Then I will paste this, and here we just return a user. So I can do this. Let me refactor. Here I can return a user. We have this list which is called users, and I can come here into our controller. I can copy this and paste it here. So after doing this, you can see for this bin to be used in the controller, like I told you, it offers loose coupling. So I'll just copy this class because it's now an application scoped, so it can be used in the controller here. So to be used in the controller, we can just say add inject. It tells that we want to use this bin. That's the dependency injection. User service, and by doing this, we just call this method. Sorry. So we can copy this and we can paste this here. And the method that we created, this one, and we can pass this method. So our controller will be a bit smart. And this is the user. For this thing to work, you see we added inject, and it knows that this thing has been added into a container. How do you know this has been added into a container? It's because we added this at application scoped. So this is how dependence works. So by doing this, first you are adding it into a container. So if you want to use this anywhere in your application, we just use inject. So that's why we come into this controller, and we just add an annotation inject, and it is being pulled from the container, and you can now use it. If you forgot to do this, it will throw an exception because you did not yet instantiate it. So it will be a now. So by adding this, it will be instantiated. So this is how it works. So after running the application, let's see what is going to happen. We need the endpoint to create a user. This is the endpoint that we used on previous tutorial. So if I do send, you can see it is working fine, no problem. So let me try to remove it inject and save. Let's test creating again. You can see it throws an exception. This one, it's a runtime exception. If you go here, we are trying to call user service which is not yet initialized, instantiated. So to instantiate it, this thing is supposed to be added into what? We must inject it from the container. So that's what we call dependency injection. So if I try to also to come here to this service, and let me say I removed this, you can see the arrow is gone. So let me test it again. I'm sure it's supposed to fail. Let me say if I try to run this, sometimes at the application it fails to run because you can see the application fails to run because it did not find this user service implementation into the container when we try to inject it into here. when you're trying to inject it here. So it means this thing is not in a container. So to solve that, we need to add this annotation. And we can come back into the container, and you can see the arrow which was showing here is gone. So this is what you call dependency injection. So remember, if you are using a controller, you can use a REST controller. This one, it's a request scoped. We did define a request scoped because it is already done on REST controller, like what we did on application. So this one, it's the same as application, but this one is a request scoped because it serves HTTPS. So the other thing that I want to talk about, so these are called class-based. There are other dependency injection called producers method and producers properties. So let me do this. I want to create a new Java class and I will call it producers. So let me add an application scoped first. It will be added into our container. This bin is going to be added into our container. So here we need to call it producers. It produces, sorry. So it produces, I can say double pi equals to math.py. So these are called producers fields or producers properties. So for me to start to use this one, because I added this one as produces, this is a produces method property. So to use this in my property, it's now easy because I defined it as pi. So I can just come here where I said here in our service, because it's also an application. I told you have to say it inject as usual, it inject, and we just say double pi. So it knows that this pi already defined into our producer here. So here, that's where I'm putting all the produces. So the class I called it producers. So this pi, I can say this pi is now matching this one that I put in the implementation. So let me try to run and see the value of this pi. So let me remove this. When I try to create, I just want it to want to test if it's working. So let me print it. Pi is this one. And then I can run the application now. So after running here, let me just delete the console and we can test. If I do this, and let's look into our log, you can see the pi. So this is how you can create your objects that you want to use throughout the whole application, and you can inject it as a field. These are field produces, so you can inject it. And also there are methods produces, and this method produces. Let's go to our producers. Let's create a class, maybe list of strings. Names. So by doing this, if I try to, I want to inject this list in the application service here. So I can just say the name of is this one, names list, and it's a list. So what I can do, I just come and copy this, and I can come here. But you can see this being like this icon that you see are seeing here, it shows that this is being injected and it's already in a container, but this one is not yet in the container. Why? Because on our producers we didn't specify that this is a produce. So I just say add produces. So after doing that, if I click it, if I come here, I have to specify it inject like this. So if I try to run also this one, it will print the list, and I'll just say so. Let me test again here, and I can test this, and I can come back here. You can see this is our list. I think you are now happy with the dependency injection. You are now understanding how to use produces, how to use application scoped, how to use request controller. This can help you to develop your application fast. And if you know this basic concept, you can develop anything that you want, and you can avoid the null point exception. To know, now you'll be able to know maybe this thing is not yet in my container. So the other thing that we can do here, we can do what is called constructor dependent injection by not using at inject. You can just delete this at inject, and we can come here and create a constructor, and I can say generate constructor with this pi and this one. And you can see it is still injecting. If I do this, it will also inject the second one. So these are showing that these are being injected from our container. Even if I test to run the application, we will not get any error because we are using constructor dependency injection without using at inject. And this is the one that is that you are supposed to use all the time, the constructor dependent injection. So the other thing that I want to tell you about is to use events, and you can use events and also observers. So let me create. We already have something like okay, we have something like this user. So I want to create a new class, and I can call it observers. So you have to know this, and here we just say add application scoped so that it can be added into our container. Then here we are going to say listen void listen new registration. So what happens when registration completed? So we will be listening to this method, will be listening. So here we need to add an annotation called it observes. This one, and the class that you want to listen is this one. Let's say this user, we want to pass this user, or we can say register user record. Let's say this one. Then we just say registration completed, and you can do other stuff like sending welcome email. So right now we are trying to separate things so that we don't put everything in a one service. So this one is just to observe what is really happening. So what we can do, we need to come here, and here we can just, let's try to do this. We just say event remember to inject, or what you can do, like I told you, we need to do constructor dependence injection, generate constructor with these three. So it's being identified here. So let me do this and see. Yes. So after registration, in our registration method, let's say here we need to emit, we need to fire, in fact, we need to fire this. We can fire this event. And let me come back to my observer, to my observers here. And let me just say register record.username, like this. So let's test this application and see. So before let's just clear everything, or let me test. Let me send a request and let's see what is really happening. You can see now, this is the ID that we send, this is the message. So by doing this, an event was fired here, and it was being listened here with these observers by just adding this annotation, it observes. So you can separate things using observers, if event emitters, to emit any event. So you can send any request, either any object, and it will be listening to this. So this is how it works, and this is how dependency injection works in Quarkus. So there are things like interceptors that you have to know. So interceptors, you can create custom interceptors, or some of them are being used on HTTP requests. Like when the request gets into the application, maybe you want to log something, or you want to intercept a request by modifying headers and validating something. Then when response goes out from the application to the user, you want to modify. So those things are interceptors. It's like you want to intercept things that are getting in the application, and you can do some of the modification. So this is what you are supposed to know about interceptors. But I will teach you more about interceptors in the future video tutorials. But for now, these are the basics to learn dependency injection, and also how the beans are being created, how to avoid null pointer exception if you don't specify the application scoped, if you don't inject your instance. So coders, if you are new to this channel, may you kindly subscribe, click the notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever I upload new video.